My boyfriend always said I was too emotional. I cried too much, cared too loud, felt too deep. He stayed calm, dismissive, cold, so I stopped explaining, matched his energy, said nothing. That's when he broke down crying and left me 27 missed calls. I cried at the movie trailer. Not even the movie, just the trailer. A 30-second clip about a daughter hugging her father before he leaves for war. I wasn't sobbing. I wasn't making a scene, just a tear. One, silent, honest. And he looked at me like I'd just confessed to murder. Seriously, he muttered, shaking his head. It's not even sad yet. I wiped my face and laughed it off. Said, I'm just like that, like it was a joke. Like my emotions were a personality quirk, not my heartbeat. That was the first time I felt the sting of shame over something I never thought I'd question, my ability to feel. It didn't start as criticism. It started as teasing. You're so sensitive. You cry over everything. You're like a walking rom-com. I used to smile when he said those things. I thought it meant I was warm, alive, that I brought color to his grayscale world. But over time, it didn't feel playful anymore. It felt like a verdict. You're too emotional. That one landed like a punch. We were arguing about something small, something stupid. I can't even remember what. Probably dinner plans or a forgotten errand. But I remember what I said. I said, it hurts when you don't respond to me. And he laughed, not loudly. Just that dry, dismissive breath that said, here she goes again. Then he said it. You're too emotional. And everything inside me froze. Because suddenly it wasn't about the dinner, or the silence, or the way he scrolled through his phone when I tried to talk. It was about me. Being me was the problem. I used to think feeling deeply was a strength. That crying when I cared made me compassionate, not chaotic. But in that moment, I wondered if I was broken. I stopped mid-sentence, mid-tear, stared at him like he'd just rewired my entire identity. I'm not yelling, I said. I'm just upset. You're always upset. I didn't reply, because anything I said would have become another exhibit in his case against me. So I walked out, not far, just to the balcony, just to breathe. But even out there with the cold air on my face, I could feel the shift. He wasn't sorry, he was annoyed. I was the storm he'd learned to ignore. And the worst part, I started to believe him. I started apologizing for crying during commercials, for overthinking text messages, for writing long birthday cards, for buying 24 cookies for his coworkers when he mentioned they were stressed at work. Too much, always too much. I started to shrink. Stopped telling stories with enthusiasm. Stopped tearing up when a friend shared something vulnerable. Stopped dancing in the kitchen. Stopped being me. I gave him a quieter version of myself. And he smiled like that was love. But it wasn't. It was compliance. Emotional suppression repackaged as compatibility. And every time I bit my tongue instead of speaking my truth, I fed that lie. I remember one night we were lying in bed. I had this ache in my chest. That kind of ache that says something is wrong and it's not going away. I rolled toward him and whispered, do you think I'm too much? He didn't even open his eyes. Just said, babe, not tonight. That was the night I realized. The worst kind of loneliness is lying next to someone who doesn't see you. I stayed. Of course I did. Because I thought love meant trying harder, feeling less, making myself smaller to fit the spaces he offered. I thought if I could just calm down, he'd finally hear me. But here's what I know now. When someone tells you your feelings are too much, what they really mean is, they're too little. And I should have left the night he called me too emotional. Because that night, he didn't just reject my tears. He rejected the woman brave enough to feel them. He never yelled. Not once. Not when I forgot to pick up the dry cleaning. Not when I raised my voice in frustration. Not even the night I told him I didn't feel loved anymore. No yelling, just silence. The kind that sits heavy in a room like smoke. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to leave you choking. That was his gift. His strategy. While I cried and crumbled, he stayed calm. Distant. Eerily composed. It made me feel like a fire in a glass room, burning, visible, intense, and completely contained. No oxygen, no escape. He'd sit there, arms crossed, watching me spiral like I was something to be studied, not held. His expression? Blank. As if my pain was a language he'd heard too many times and chosen not to translate anymore. You're overreacting, he'd say in that level tone. And somehow that hurt more than if he'd screamed. Because at least screaming means something moved you, but he just stared. Cold, detached. Like my heart was a performance he'd seen too many times to clap for again. So I started clapping for myself, explaining my reactions, justifying every tear. I became a walking emotional translator, always on defense. I'm not angry, I'm just scared. I'm not yelling, I just need you to hear me. This isn't about control, it's about feeling seen. He'd nod or say nothing, or worse, he'd go for a walk. Those walks destroyed me more than any argument ever could, because they were calculated, timed, designed to leave me in a panic, replaying every word I'd said, wondering what I did wrong. And when he came back, he'd be cooler than before. Maybe he'd sit on the couch and open his laptop like nothing happened. Maybe he'd ask what I wanted for dinner, as if my crying wasn't still drying on my cheeks. The message was clear. My emotions were the problem, not his distance. Not his coldness, just my volume. Once, after a particularly hard week, work stress, family chaos, no sleep, I broke down after spilling wine on the rug. It wasn't about the wine. It was about everything. I knelt on the floor, cleaning it with shaking hands, and whispered, "I feel like I'm always falling apart." He sat across from me, calm, unmoved. "You should probably get that checked out." No tenderness, just that flat suggestion. As if I were a car engine making a weird noise. As if my breakdown wasn't worthy of compassion, just maintenance. I didn't reply. Because I knew if I pushed, if I cried harder, if I made him look at me, he'd use that same word again. Too emotional. He said it like it was a diagnosis, and I let it stick like a label. Zara once said I was passionate. Lena said I was honest with my heart. He said I was too much. And somehow, his version became the one I carried. Because he wasn't mean, he wasn't abusive. He didn't hit or curse or cheat, at least not that I knew of, so I told myself I was lucky, that I had it good, that maybe my expectations were just too high. But what I couldn't say out loud was that his calm was slowly killing me, because it wasn't calm born of emotional intelligence. It was calm born of detachment. It wasn't stillness. It was shutdown. It wasn't maturity. It was avoidance dressed up as wisdom. He once told me he never cried at funerals. "I just don't get worked up like that," he said, proud of it, like feeling was some kind of flaw he'd learned to override. And I remember thinking, how do you love someone without ever letting anything break your heart? The answer was simple. You don't. You control them, you manage them, you tolerate them. But you don't love them, not deeply. Not the way I needed. He liked that I loved deeply when it was directed at him, when it came in the form of care packages and back rubs and forehead kisses. But the moment that love asked for something back, he pulled away. Because love, to him, was fine as long as it was quiet. I once told him I felt like he left the room every time I showed real emotion, even if he physically stayed. He blinked and said, "That's not fair." And maybe it wasn't. But it was true, and he didn't try to prove otherwise. He just went quiet again. And I went quieter, too. I stopped asking him what he felt. Stopped trying to explain what I needed. Because trying to open a door that someone keeps closing in your face doesn't just exhaust you. It changes you, turns your heart into a locked box. And soon, you start locking it even when no one's around. "He's so mature," Zara said, stirring her oat milk latte like she hadn't just dropped a blade into my lap. We were sitting at that cafe she loved, the one with the plants hanging from the ceiling like gossip. She had her sunnies perched on her head, completely unaware of the fact that I was trying not to scream. "Mature," I echoed, swallowing hard. She smiled. "Yeah, he's calm. Level-headed, you're the one who always feels big. It's like you balance each other out right." Balance, that word felt like a slap. I wanted to ask her if she'd ever tried to balance a matchstick on ice. One melts, one burns, there's no middle ground, just damage. But I didn't say that. Because Zara only saw the surface. The dinner parties, the birthday presents, the photos he took of me under golden hour lighting, captioned with half-hearted compliments. She saw the arm around my shoulder and the babe in passing and thought love. She didn't see the way I sat in silence on the drive home, blinking back tears because he'd gone cold again for reasons I couldn't name. She didn't hear the way he sighed when I brought up anything that required effort. She didn't know that "I'm tired" was his version of "I don't care." Even my brother liked him, said he was chill. That word again, calm, chill, mature. They thought I needed someone to ground me, someone to temper my storms. No one ever asked if maybe I was storming because I kept getting left out in the cold. No one asked if I was drowning in someone else's silence while trying to keep my own voice from fading. Once at a party, Zara pulled me aside after he kissed my cheek in front of everyone. "You've got the perfect guy," she said, eyes wide. Like, seriously, so many girls would kill for someone like that. He's just stable. I smiled, because what else could I do? Tell her that his stability came at the cost of my sanity. That the same man who held my hand in public would shrug off my tears in private. That the only time he got passionate was when he was defending his own indifference. I smiled. I nodded. I toasted with her. And then I went home and cried into my pillow like a woman living two lives. One that everyone admired. And one no one wanted to admit existed. Even Lena, my sister, treaded carefully. "He seems reserved," she once said, cautiously sipping her tea. That was Lena code for emotionally unavailable. But she didn't push. I wish she had. I wish someone had looked me in the eye and said, "Hey, he doesn't love you the way you need to be loved." But instead, they all said things like, "At least he doesn't yell. At least he doesn't cheat. At least he's not like your ex. At least, at least, at least." As if basic decency was a gift. As if being unkind in subtle ways was somehow more forgivable. As if being unseen was preferable to being abused. Let me be clear, it's not. There's a different kind of bruising that happens when no one hits you. It's the ache of being overlooked, of being in a relationship where love is rationed out like oxygen on a dying spaceship. And the worst part, you start gaslighting yourself. You start thinking, maybe this is what healthy looks like. Maybe I'm the one who doesn't know how to accept quiet love, but it wasn't quiet love. It was conditional affection. It was the kind of love that only came when I was small enough, soft enough, calm enough to fit the frame he'd built for me. And no one noticed. Because I smiled in all the pictures. Because I laughed at all the jokes. Because I didn't bleed where anyone could see it. I kept my wounds tucked neatly under pretty outfits and polite conversation. Even Zara, my best friend, missed it. And I wanted so badly for someone, anyone, to look closer. To say, "Hey, I see it, I see you dimming." But no one did, so I kept dimming. And he kept shining out there in public where his charm was currency, where his detachment read as cool, where his lack of reaction made everyone think he was the safe one. No one ever asked what it meant to be with someone who didn't react, who didn't flinch when you broke down, who didn't light up when you laughed, who didn't move when you begged for something real. They thought his calm made me lucky. I thought it made me lonely. And in the end, we were both right. It wasn't even a real fight. Just one of those moments where tension hangs between two people like a fog, thick, uncomfortable, but not yet a storm. We were sitting in the car, parked outside the grocery store. A song came on the radio, one of those slow, aching ballads that sounds like heartbreak dripped into a melody. I made a quiet comment, barely a whisper. "This one reminds me of when you forgot my birthday last year." He didn't even look up from his phone. Just said, "Jesus, are we still talking about that?" My mouth opened, closed, because yes, I hadn't gotten over it. Not because I wanted to dwell, but because it hurt. Because the person I loved more than anyone had forgotten the one day I hoped to be remembered. But he didn't forget. Not really. He just didn't plan, didn't text until noon. No gift, no dinner. Just a tired, happy birthday, babe, and a promise to make it up to me. He never did. And now, months later, the memory still sat on my chest like a weight. "I just wanted you to know it still stings," I said. He looked at me then. Expression flat, bored, even. "You always make everything about feelings." There it was, the first shutdown, not a door slammed, not a curse. Just a sentence that closed me off like a lock clicking shut. Everything about that moment froze in place. The hum of the engine, the glow of the dashboard, the lump forming in my throat like a scream with no voice. "I wasn't trying to fight," I whispered. He sighed, long and slow. "You always say that. But it always turns into a fight. I just wanted to share how I felt. And I'm telling you, you don't have to narrate every emotion." I felt my chest cave in. That's what it felt like. Like I'd been mid-sentence and someone hit mute. I looked out the window, blinking fast, trying to force the tears back where they came from. Because that's what I'd been learning slowly, painfully. Crying was a liability. Honesty was dangerous. And love in his world was quiet or not at all. "I'm sorry," I said. It slipped out before I could stop it. And when I said it, I wasn't apologizing for bringing up my birthday. I was apologizing for being myself. He nodded like that made sense, then reached for the aux cord and changed the song. I stared at the glove compartment like it had answers. I didn't cry until later. At home, curled up in bed while he sat in the living room watching reruns, I let the tears fall in silence. No sobs, no heaving, just wet reminders that I had crossed a line he didn't draw, but that I'd still be punished for. That night, I told myself, next time, just keep it in. Next time, when something hurts, don't say it. Next time, smile and nod and tuck the ache away like a secret you're too embarrassed to name. Because he doesn't yell. He doesn't hit. He doesn't even raise his voice. But that's the thing no one tells you about emotional shutdowns. They're quiet, like frost creeping across glass. You don't notice it until everything you love is frozen. And I was freezing. Fast. The next morning, he kissed me on the forehead. "Better mood today?" he asked, playful. I laughed. Because what else could I do? I was learning the language of surviving someone else's comfort. And step one was this: don't feel too loud. He stopped saying, "I love you." Not all at once. Not in a way most people would notice. At first, it was just a pause, me saying it, him nodding. Me saying it, him replying hours later in a text that also included "what's for dinner?" Or "did you pay the Wi-Fi bill?" Then came the night I said it, while he was brushing his teeth. "I love you," I said gently like a peace offering. He looked at me in the mirror and smiled, but no words came out, just foam, just toothpaste and quiet. I told myself it was fine. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he'd say it later. He didn't. He never did. He stopped saying it like it was a casual thing, the way people stop using a phrase they think is overplayed. And yet, he still used love for other things. He loved the new Marvel movie. He loved the steak at that overpriced place downtown. He loved the dog his coworker brought to the office. But me, he just nodded, or kissed my cheek, or said, "You too," like it was a favor. I should have left the first time he liked a long, vulnerable message I sent him and didn't reply. I'd had a terrible day. Work was chaos. My mom had called crying. I was exhausted, drained, trying not to fall apart at 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. I sent him a message, long, raw, unfiltered. I told him everything. How overwhelmed I felt. How I just needed to know someone was in my corner. He liked it, pressed the little heart. Didn't reply, not a "let's talk." Not a "I'm here." Not even a "that sucks." Just a like. As if that little heart button could hold mine together. I stared at the screen for 20 minutes, waiting for the typing dots. They never came. The next day, he said he just didn't know what to say. And I said, "You could have said anything." He shrugged. "Sometimes no answer is better than the wrong one." "No," I whispered. "Sometimes no answer feels like abandonment." But I didn't say that out loud, because I already knew what he'd say. I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. So I took the silence and folded it like laundry. Made it neat, palatable, easy to store. And the next time I had a bad day, I didn't tell him. I texted Zara instead. I called Lena and let her voice fill the ache. Because slowly, quietly, he had taught me that my emotions were my problem. That loving someone should never require them to show up for you, only to be there. And he was there. Technically. In the living room, on the other side of the bed. Next to me in photos, always there, but never really here. And the scariest part? I started to adjust. I started shrinking myself down to fit the outline of someone who wouldn't scare him off. I stopped sending the long texts. Stopped bringing up my feelings unless they were sugar-coated and shrink-wrapped in soft tones and apologies. "I didn't mean to bother you. I know you're busy, but..." I was probably just overthinking. I started editing my heart and calling it maturity. I told myself this is what growing up looks like. That real love isn't messy. That drama was something girls like me had to grow out of. But I was wrong, because love is messy. Love cries, love asks. Love shows up even when it's inconvenient. And silence? Silence isn't neutral. Silence can be cruel. It can hold you hostage in a room full of things unsaid, where the only voice you hear is your own, questioning, overthinking, unraveling. And one night, I sat in bed beside him, watching him scroll through TikTok while I stared at the ceiling, and I realized, this isn't love. This is a museum of what we used to be. He stopped talking, so I stopped talking. He stopped reaching, so I stopped hoping. And still, somehow I was the one apologizing. Every single time. Lena never liked him. She never said it that way, though. She wasn't confrontational. She didn't try to make me choose. She played it safe, masked her warnings in questions, draped her concern in silence. But I felt it. Every time he came around, she was cordial. Not warm, not rude, just measured. Like she was watching a storm approach and didn't want to be accused of overreacting until the lightning hit. It wasn't until a Sunday brunch, months into my unraveling, that she finally let something slip. We were clearing plates in her kitchen. He had left early. Got a call, he said, barely touching his food. I had shrugged it off like always. He's busy, I said. It's work. Lena said nothing at the time, just handed me a dish towel. But as I wiped down the counter, she looked up and said, "You shouldn't have to beg someone to care." It was quiet, gentle, not a grenade, more like a match flicked onto wet ground. I froze. "What?" I asked, playing dumb. She sighed. "You light up when you talk about him, but when you talk to him, it's like you're holding your breath." I laughed too loudly. "It's just, he's not super affectionate in public." "I didn't say affectionate," she said. "I said present." And there it was, the word I'd been avoiding. Present. He was never really present, not when I spoke, not when I cried, not even when I laughed unless he could take credit for it. I tried to brush it off. Told her we were just different people. Told her I was intense and he was just more even. She looked at me like she'd heard that script before. "You've always been big-hearted," she said. "I used to envy that. But watching you now, it feels like you're folding in on yourself." I said nothing, because what was I supposed to say? "You're right, Lena, I have been folding. But I call it compromise now so it doesn't break my heart." That night I cried alone in the shower. Not because of him, because of me, because deep down I knew Lena wasn't wrong. And it hurt in a way his silence never could. Because she saw me. She always saw me. When we were kids, I'd cry over broken crayons, over lost hair ties, over animals in sad commercials, and Lena never laughed. She'd hug me, sit beside me, hand me tissues. She never asked me to be smaller, she just made space. But now I was shrinking in a relationship where space only existed if I created it for him. And I told Lena she was wrong. That's what guts me the most. I defended him. Again. "I don't want someone overly emotional," I told her. "He's steady, grounded." "You're not looking for chaos," she said. "You're looking for partnership." I rolled my eyes. "He loves me." And she nodded, but not like she believed it. More like she was letting me choose my own lesson. We didn't talk about it again, not for a while, but after that brunch her texts changed. More check-ins, more "you okay?" messages. More ways of saying I'm still here, even if he isn't. She never said "I told you so." Not even later. She didn't need to. Because I heard her voice every time I stared at a text message he hadn't answered. Every time I whispered, "I love you" to a man who answered with silence. Every time I cried in the bathroom with the water running so he wouldn't hear. Lena became the voice in my head. You shouldn't have to beg someone to care. And eventually, I stopped. I stopped begging. But I also stopped talking. And that's when things really started to shift. It's amazing how quickly people will tell you they're proud of your growth when what they're really admiring is your silence. He said things felt better. We weren't fighting anymore. I wasn't crying as often. I wasn't pointing out every bruise he left on my heart with his cold hands and colder words. "Things have been good lately," he said one morning, pouring coffee like we were a couple on a Hallmark card. I smiled, sipped my tea. Didn't tell him I'd cried in the car 2 nights ago. Didn't tell him I sat in the dark for an hour wondering how I ended up here, half of myself pretending to be whole. I didn't say anything anymore. I answered, "I'm fine," so often it started to taste like gospel. A prayer I recited to get through the day. "How are you?" "I'm fine, are you mad?" "I'm fine, are you happy?" "I'm fine." I wasn't fine, but I was quiet. And to him, that was the same thing. He thought my silence meant peace. It didn't, it meant surrender. I stopped telling him when I was upset. Stopped asking him to engage. I'd watch his eyes glaze over while I spoke, and instead of getting hurt, I just shut up. Mid-sentence, mid-thought, I'd lose the will to finish. Why bother? He wasn't listening anyway. He stopped asking follow-ups. Stopped noticing when I went cold. Stopped asking why I stopped saying I love you first, and I stopped needing him to. Because somewhere along the way, I learned that needing him meant losing me. So I buried the need. Every feeling I once wore proudly, I folded into a corner of myself he couldn't touch. I used to cry easily. Now I blinked faster. I used to speak passionately. Now I nodded and changed the subject. I used to write him long, unfiltered texts about how much I loved him. Now I sent K and cool and on my way. He called it maturity. I like us like this, he said one night, lying in bed beside me. I looked at the ceiling. Like what? Calm, he said, it's peaceful. It wasn't peace. It was the sound of me locking every door inside myself and swallowing the key. And the worst part? He was thriving, happy, relaxed. Thought we were finally in sync. Because emotional distance is comfortable for people who never plan to meet you halfway in the first place. He didn't miss my heart. He just liked the quiet. Even Zara noticed. You've been different, she said one afternoon while we walked through Target. Better, different, or worse? I asked. She hesitated, quieter. I laughed, I'm just growing up. But even as I said it, I felt like I was betraying something sacred. Because this version of me, she wasn't grown up. She was shrinking. I wasn't becoming wiser. I was becoming smaller, less threatening, less opinionated, less me. And somehow he thought that meant I was getting closer to being the one. Because in his world, love wasn't about expansion. It was about containment. And I had finally become easy to contain. I stopped dancing in the kitchen. Stopped crying at movies. Stopped sending voice notes to friends about my day. Even my laughter changed, shorter, quieter, just enough to pass as happy. He once told me he loved that I didn't overcomplicate things anymore. As if pain, when unspoken, ceases to exist. As if silence is the same thing as stability. But here's the thing about bottling up everything you feel. Eventually, it ferments. And the day you finally twist the cap, there's an explosion. Her name was Dr. Sienna Park. She had soft curls that framed her face and eyes that could see through a lie before it left your mouth. She wasn't intimidating, just disarming. The kind of presence that made you want to exhale before you even realized you were holding your breath. I sat on her couch, legs crossed, fingers clenched tightly in my lap. She asked me why I came. I told her I didn't know. That was a lie. I knew. I just didn't know how to say, because I'm disappearing inside a relationship that looks perfect on paper and hollow in person. So instead, I said, I think I just need to talk to someone. She nodded like she'd heard that 1,000 times. All right, she said. Let's start with your name, then we'll work our way in. I laughed, work our way in. To where it hurts, she replied, smiling gently. I didn't think I'd cry in the first session, but I did. I cried when she asked about my relationship. I cried when I described how he looked at me like my feelings were chores. I cried when I said, he doesn't yell, he doesn't cheat. He just isn't there. And then, I cried harder when she asked the question that changed everything. Why are you trying to earn love that should be freely given? Just like that, softly, without accusation, no pity, no push. Just a question dropped like a stone into still water. And I sat there, blinking, completely unprepared for how much it would shatter me. Because I didn't have an answer. I didn't know why I twisted myself into silence, why I swallowed my sadness to keep him comfortable, why I stopped dancing, laughing, crying, dreaming, just so he'd stay. Or maybe I did know, maybe I just didn't want to hear it out loud. Sienna waited. She didn't fill the silence. Didn't save me from it. She let it press down on me until I realized. I wasn't earning love. I was chasing approval. From someone who never asked me to be myself, only to be manageable. I don't think he'd love me if I was too emotional, I whispered. Is that what you believe? She asked. No, I said. That's what he showed me. And then I told her everything. The calm he wore like armor. The way he used my tears as ammunition. The quiet disinterest that felt like 1,000 tiny cuts. The silence that followed every time I asked to be seen. I told her about Lena's warning, Zara's hesitation. The birthday he forgot, and the apology I never got. And then I said something I didn't know was living in me until it came out. I think I broke myself to keep him whole. Sienna nodded. And do you still want to keep him whole? I didn't answer because I wasn't sure anymore. The second session I talked more. The third I cried less. The fourth I laughed once at something small, but it felt big. And every time I sat on that couch, I felt a little more real. Like I was stitching myself back together with every honest word I let escape my mouth. I stopped saying, "I'm fine." Stopped defending him in conversations where no one was attacking. Stopped pretending indifference was maturity. Sienna never told me to leave him. She never told me what to do. But she kept asking, "Does this version of you feel like home?" And every time she did, I got a little closer to the answer. I was becoming a stranger to myself in that relationship. A quiet, agreeable, emotionally edited stranger. And the worst part, he liked her better. But I didn't. I missed the girl who wrote long texts full of feeling, who cried at commercials, who called her sister in the middle of the night just to say, "I'm scared," without shame. I missed me. And by the fifth session, I knew something had to give. Because if I kept trying to earn his love, I'd lose my own. He asked me if I was okay. It was a Tuesday. Just after 9 p.m., he came home, tossed his keys in the dish by the door, and said it like a habit, like something you say to keep up appearances. "Hey, you okay?" And for the first time in a long time, I didn't make it easier for him. I didn't give him the script he always expected. The explanation, the softening. I just smiled, nodded, and said, "I'm good." Then I turned over on the couch and kept scrolling through my phone. No follow-up, no detail, no attempt to bridge the distance I didn't create. I felt him pause, not long. Just enough for me to register the shift. Like he suddenly realized the dynamic had changed and couldn't figure out why it felt unfamiliar. But he didn't press. He never did. So he walked into the kitchen and made himself a sandwich. And I sat there, chest calm, heart unbothered, watching him exist in the space I used to beg him to fill with conversation and connection. It was strange how light I felt. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that his silence didn't make him strong. It made him avoidant, detached, emotionally lazy. And if he got to live in that comfort, then so would I, except I wasn't comfortable. I was controlled. I used to beg for scraps of warmth from a man who served it cold and expected gratitude. Now I was done performing. I gave him exactly what he said he always wanted: peace. Stillness. No drama. But it didn't feel like peace to him anymore, because it didn't come with access. He'd been feeding off my energy for so long that he mistook my emotional labor for love. And now that I'd stopped translating, soothing, explaining, he had nothing left to hold on to. It took less than a week for the cracks to show. He started asking more questions. "You're quiet lately. Everything okay at work? Did I do something?" I kept my answers short, polite, measured, because that's what he wanted, wasn't it? The unbothered girlfriend, the cool girl, the low-maintenance fantasy, so I gave it to him. And he hated it. He tried to get under my skin the way he used to. Brought up Zara, made a joke about how she probably thinks I'm a robot. I just shrugged, probably. He blinked, seriously. I smiled. Yeah. He didn't know what to do with that, because I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't flinching. I wasn't folding myself into smaller shapes to make him feel like more of a man. I had learned in therapy that love without reciprocity isn't love, it's performance. And I was off the stage. He started hovering around the house like a shadow, lingering in doorways, asking about my day and actually waiting for an answer. He never used to. He used to nod mid-sentence, scroll through his phone while I spoke, or offer advice I didn't ask for. Now, he was listening, because silence was no longer his weapon, it was mine. And I used it the way he taught me. Strategically, coldly, like armor. It wasn't revenge, it was clarity. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was just done bleeding for someone who never noticed the wound. And it drove him crazy. One night I came home late from Lena's. I didn't text ahead, didn't check in, didn't explain myself. He was on the couch when I walked in, eyes locked on the door like a dog waiting for a master who'd forgotten him. "You didn't text," he said. "I didn't know I needed to," I replied, slipping off my shoes. "I just didn't know where you were." I was with my sister. He stood slowly. I know, but usually you tell me. I looked at him calm. Usually I do a lot of things. He didn't respond. Because the truth hit him in that moment, he hadn't just lost my voice. He'd lost my effort. And effort was the only thing holding us together in the first place. He tried to joke the tension away. You're really leaning into this whole mysterious woman thing, huh? I smiled, feels good. And it did, because every time I didn't over-explain, I felt a little more powerful. Every time I didn't fill the silence with apologies, I felt a little more whole. Every time I didn't chase his comfort, I felt closer to my own. He didn't say anything else that night, but he stayed restless, tossed in bed, got up for water twice, came back with that nervous energy men get when they realize they no longer have the emotional upper hand. And the next morning, I caught him staring at me while I buttered toast. Not with love, with fear. The kind that creeps in when a man realizes the woman he kept calling, too emotional, has finally stopped showing him her heart. He followed me into the kitchen like a shadow that had finally noticed it didn't belong. It was a Saturday morning. I was slicing strawberries for pancakes. My playlist was low, humming something soft and unbothered, the kind of song that doesn't ask for attention, it just exists. Like I was trying to, and then he said it. Why don't you talk to me anymore? I didn't turn around, just kept slicing. Because the sound of my voice had always been a lifeline for him, proof that I still cared, still ached, still wanted to be heard. And now the silence was mine. I'm talking now, I said calm. Even, he took a step closer. You know what I mean. I put the knife down gently, wiped my hands, turned to face him. You mean why I don't explain anymore? Why I don't cry or beg or chase? He swallowed. I mean, yeah, you used to. React, I offered. He nodded. You used to feel everything so loud, he said, almost like he missed it. Now it's like you don't feel anything at all. And there it was, the full circle. The same man who once told me I was too emotional was now mourning the fire he spent years trying to extinguish. I tilted my head. You never liked it when I did. His shoulders fell. I didn't know it would feel like this. Like what? Empty. I almost laughed because he finally said it. Out loud, empty. That's what I'd been trying to tell him for months. That's what I'd been carrying alone in every silent dinner, every ignored message, every time I swallowed my hurt just to avoid another sigh from him. Now he felt it. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing the consequences of his emotional neglect for the first time and couldn't figure out when the damage happened. But it wasn't sudden, it was slow. A death by 1,000 cuts made of apathy and silence and lukewarm affection. I miss you, he said, voice barely steady. You miss control, I corrected. No, he said quickly, too quickly. I miss you. The way you used to talk to me. The way you used to light up when I came home. You miss who I was for you, I said, not who I actually am. He ran a hand through his hair, paced a little. This is crazy, he muttered. It's like I'm losing you, and I don't even know how. You're not losing me, I said. You already did. You just didn't notice because I went quiet instead of loud. He stopped moving, stared at me. You're serious. I nodded. He stepped closer. But we've been so good lately. No fights, no tension, no. No me, I said. There's been no me. You've been living with a version of me that's been surviving on autopilot. His lip trembled. He looked like a man who just found out the foundation of his house was made of sand. And then he broke, tears. Actual tears. He dropped into the chair by the table, head in his hands, shaking. I think I broke you, he whispered. I stood there, arms crossed, watching. Not cold, not angry, just done. I didn't go to him, didn't kneel down or stroke his back. Didn't offer the emotional labor he was finally asking for now that he felt what I had been screaming in silence. You didn't break me, I said softly. You ignored me while I broke myself. He looked up, eyes red, desperate. I didn't mean to, I swear I didn't. You didn't mean not to either. He blinked. I gave you everything, I continued. My words, my emotions, my heart, and you treated them like noise. He stood up suddenly. So what now, you just give up, that's it? No, I said. I just stopped playing the only role in this relationship that kept us alive. He reached for me and I stepped back. That was the moment. That was when it hit him. He wasn't the calm one anymore, I was, and it terrified him. Because my silence wasn't passive, it was powerful. It was the proof that I had nothing left to explain. He started crying, not the kind of cry that comes with shame or a soft apology. This was ugly, raw, heaving. The kind of crying that twists the face and bends the spine, as if regret could actually make a body fold in on itself. I stood across from him, unmoved, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I had felt everything for months. Years. I had already cried all his tears for him. Every time I begged him to listen. Every time I whispered, "I love you," into silence. Every time I sat alone in the bathroom, trying to understand how someone so physically close could feel so emotionally far. So no, I didn't cry now. I didn't rush forward. I didn't offer him the tissue I used to keep beside the bed for myself. I just watched, and he unraveled. He covered his face with his hands, breath ragged. "I don't know what's happening to me." "This," I said, "is what happens when the mirror finally talks back." He shook his head. "It's like I'm not enough for you." And God, that line, the same line I'd whispered into my pillow night after night. Now it was his turn. He was drowning in it. I could have said 1,000 things. Could have reminded him how many times he made me feel like too much. How often he rolled his eyes at my emotions, laughed at my softness, called my tears exhausting. But I didn't. I let him sit in it. The weight, the confusion, the shame, because this was the moment he finally touched the thing I'd been carrying alone. "I think I broke us," he said, tears spilling again. I exhaled. "No, you just refused to build anything with me. I was constructing a home, while you stood at the door wondering why it wasn't cozy yet." He wiped his face, eyes bloodshot. "Can we fix it?" That's the question they all ask too late. Can we fix it? As if love is a car with a broken engine and not a person with a bruised heart. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Because I don't think you want me. I think you want the version of me who cried over you. The one who tried harder every time you pulled away." He looked stunned, because for the first time I wasn't reacting. I was reflecting, and it scared him because I wasn't angry, I was finished. "You never said anything," he whispered. "I said everything," I replied. "You just weren't listening until I stopped speaking." He reached for my hand. I didn't move. "You think I don't love you," he said, voice shaking. "I think you love having me," I said. "But love without effort is possession, not partnership." He crumpled into the chair again, and I just stood there, watching, not cold, not cruel, but whole. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't doubting myself. I wasn't asking if I was too much. I wasn't over-explaining why I hurt. I wasn't making his pain my responsibility. I was simply present, calm, steady. And in that moment, I realized, this is what he had always feared. Not my tears, not my intensity, but my power. The power that came when I finally stopped performing love and started protecting it. When I stopped giving it to someone who didn't know how to hold it. And now he was breaking in the space where I used to beg. I didn't leave in a blaze. There was no fight, no ultimatum, no suitcase flung open and stuffed with wrinkled clothes. I just told him I was going to Lena's for the weekend. That was it. He stood in the doorway, shirtless, rubbing sleep from his eyes like I'd interrupted a dream. "You okay?" he asked. I smiled, calm, easy. "I'm fine." That smile was the lie. The kind that isn't meant to deceive but to protect. Not him, me. I needed to get away. From the house where I learned to whisper my needs. From the bed where I cried with my back to him. From the walls that soaked in every apology I gave just for feeling. Lena opened the door in sweats and a bonnet, no questions asked. That's how sisters love you, without interrogation. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like coconut oil and lavender, and for the first time in months, I let my weight drop. She caught all of it. We sat on the couch eating Thai food straight from the box, watching reruns of a show we'd loved as kids. And when she handed me a glass of wine, she didn't ask, "What happened this time?" She just said, "You're safe here." And I was. For the first time in so long, I felt safe. Whole, seen. I went to bed early, phone face down, volume off. When I woke up, the screen was glowing. 27 missed calls, 6 voicemails, 3 texts from him, 1 from his sister. A video from Zara. I blinked, disoriented. The clock said 8:47 am, my flight mode heart kicked in, pounding against my ribs like it knew I was about to step into a mess I didn't create but would be expected to clean. I opened the texts, "Please call me." I can't sleep, I'm scared. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. Then his sister's message. He's been calling everyone, said he can't breathe, you okay? I was. For the first time in a long time, I was okay. I wasn't the one spiraling. I wasn't the one explaining. I wasn't the one chasing a man down to validate my existence. I was sipping coffee in my sister's robe, watching the sun come up through her kitchen window. And he was finally in the space I had lived in for far too long alone with his feelings. I played one voicemail, just one. His voice was raw, cracked. I know I messed up. I didn't know how to show up for you. I didn't know how to feel anything until you stopped. I swear I'm not okay without you. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch. I just let the words float through the air like smoke, because I knew what he meant. He wasn't saying he missed me. He was saying he missed access to me, and there's a difference. Missing the version of me that cried and stayed, that softened and soothed, that bent herself into a question mark just to avoid his discomfort. That's not love. That's addiction to comfort. But me now, the woman in Lena's robe, standing strong in her own silence, that's someone new, someone he doesn't recognize, someone he no longer gets to reach with a few late-night voicemails. I left the phone on the table and walked out to the balcony. The sky was soft, pink at the edges. The world was still waking up. And so was I. Zara showed up with bagels, no warning. That was her way. No text, no knock. Just the sound of her humming off-key in the hallway before the door swung open like it always had. Lena didn't blink, just pointed toward the kitchen and said, "She's out back." I was still on the balcony, coffee cold in my hand. Phone still glowing with missed calls I had no intention of returning. Zara slid open the glass door and stepped out, squinting at the sky like it owed her answers. "You look calm," she said, plopping down on the patio chair beside me. "I am," I replied. She passed me a bagel wrapped in parchment paper, still warm. And then she went quiet, for a minute. Maybe two. Then, softly, "You know I never liked how he looked at you, right?" I turned to her. "What do you mean?" She exhaled like she'd been holding it in for too long. "Like you were fragile, like he didn't know what to do with you, like loving you was some complicated job he never signed up for." I blinked. "Then why didn't you ever say anything?" "I thought I was being loyal," she said. "I didn't want to be the friend who ruined things just because I didn't get the vibe." "You got the vibe," I whispered. "Oh, babe," she said, eyes wide. "I got the vibes." She reached for my hand. "You kept saying he was calm, collected, grounded, but he was cold. And I watched you melt every time he handed you silence where there should have been support." Her words hit like bricks, but the soft kind. The ones that build shelter, not break bones. "Why now?" I asked. "Why say this now?" She looked at me, really looked. "Because you're finally ready to hear it, and I'm finally done pretending I didn't watch you disappear." The tears came then. Not because I was sad, but because the truth has a way of flooding the body when it finally finds air. "I thought I was the problem," I said, voice cracking. "I thought if I just loved him better, softer, smaller, he'd meet me there." "You didn't need to be smaller," she said. "You needed to be met." And then she told me the rest. The times she watched him dismiss me at brunch. The night she overheard him mocking my journal entry to one of his friends. The time she saw him like a message about clingy girlfriends and then lie about it to my face. "He didn't deserve you," she said simply, not with bitterness, just truth. And I knew then Zara had been waiting for me to come back to myself, for the version of me who used to cry without shame, who loved like it was a superpower, who called her at midnight just to read a poem. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she added. "I think I wouldn't have listened," I admitted. We sat there, two women who had known each other through every phase of becoming, watching the sky turn from soft pink to blazing blue. "I sent him that video," she confessed. "What video?" "The one of you dancing in my living room. Remember, last month, after a few glasses of wine. You were singing off-key and laughing like you hadn't laughed in months." I smiled at the memory. "He replied with a sad face emoji," she said. "Didn't even say anything, just that." And that said everything. Because that's who he was. A man who watched the woman he was supposed to love come back to life, and all he could muster was a sad emoji. "Let him miss you," Zara said. "I think he already does." "Good," she said, "but don't you dare miss him back." And I didn't. Because in that moment, With the sun on my skin and my best friend beside me, I remembered what it felt like to be loved without shrinking. He asked to see me, not in a long, dramatic message, just a single line buried between 27 missed calls and a voicemail I never played. Can we talk? And for some reason, maybe closure, maybe curiosity, I said yes. We met at a cafe we used to go to in the beginning, the one with the chipped mugs and the ivy creeping down the brick walls. The place where, once upon a time, he'd kissed my forehead and said, "You're my safe place." Now I walked in with steady feet, heart quiet. He stood as I approached. That part hadn't changed. He was always polite, always the gentleman. The kind that opens doors but forgets to hold space for your heart. I sat across from him. He looked tired, haunted, like a man who'd finally read the fine print on the soul he tried to own. "I'm glad you came," he said. I nodded. "You asked," I listened. He blinked at that, maybe because for so long it had been the other way around. He ordered tea. I didn't order anything. I wasn't staying long. "I've been a mess," he began. "You probably don't care anymore, but I haven't slept. I keep checking my phone like an idiot. I can't eat." I know," I said. "I saw the calls." He looked down. "It's just," he swallowed. "You're not reacting, that's what scares me." I tilted my head. "Because you built a version of me that only existed when I was bleeding." He didn't argue. Maybe for the first time in our entire relationship, he didn't try to twist my words into something more comfortable for him. He just looked up and said, "I didn't know what I had until you stopped trying." "No," I said softly. "You didn't know what you had until you realized it wouldn't beg anymore." He flinched. "Good, let the truth sting. Let it echo in the silence he used to love so much." "I know I hurt you," he whispered. "You silenced me," I corrected, and then got confused when I finally went quiet on purpose. He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about everything," he said. "About how I handled you, us. I didn't want to admit it, but I think I tried to love you with conditions. With rules, like if you were less emotional, maybe then I could meet you there." "And that's the difference," I replied. "I never needed you to be less, I just needed you to show up." He reached for my hand. I let him. Not because I needed it, but because I needed him to see what goodbye looked like when it wasn't screaming or crying or pleading. I needed him to feel the calm he always said he wanted, but this time, for real. "I believe you when you say you're sorry," I said. "And I believe you when you say you didn't mean to hurt me, but I'm already someone else now." He gripped my hand tighter. "I can change." "I know," I said, "but I'm not asking you to." He blinked fast. "I loved you," he said. "I know," I replied, "but you didn't love me well." That was the moment, the break. His shoulders slumped, his eyes watered again. And I smiled, not with cruelty, but with freedom. "You always said I was too emotional," I said. "But I wasn't. I just felt what you refused to. And now here we are, me calm, you cracked open." He let go of my hand. There was nothing left to hold. I stood. He didn't. Maybe he couldn't. "I hope you find peace," I said. He nodded. "And I hope the next time someone cries in front of you, you don't call it weakness." And with that, I walked away. No tears, no turnarounds, just the sound of my heels on pavement, louder than anything he'd ever said to keep me. I still cry during movies. The sappy ones, the sad ones. The ones with the happy endings that sneak up on you, and suddenly you're sobbing into your popcorn over fictional people learning to love each other right. I still talk too much when I'm excited. I interrupt. I wave my hands. I forget to breathe between sentences. I still write long messages, paragraphs when a sentence would do, because when I love someone, I want them to know. I still leave voice notes instead of texts, because sometimes written words can't hold the warmth in my voice. And I still overthink. I still ask, "Are you sure?" Twice. Sometimes 3 times. Because I know what it's like to be dismissed in the middle of asking for reassurance, and I've learned it's not a flaw to want to be sure. But the biggest change. Now I know none of that makes me too much. It makes me me, and I don't apologize for that anymore. Because I've been with someone who mistook emotional honesty for instability, who called softness a storm, who treated vulnerability like a character flaw to be corrected instead of a gift to be cherished. I bent every truth I had to make him more comfortable. And now, I won't bend at all unless it's for myself. I go to therapy every Thursday. Still sit on Sienna's couch and talk about the little victories, The moments I say what I mean without flinching. The times I don't reach for people who don't reach back. Last week I told her, I think I finally stopped waiting to be chosen. She smiled. That's because you finally chose yourself. I laughed, I cried a little. And then I went to brunch with Zara and Lena. It was loud. There were mimosas and messy hair and stories we didn't finish because we kept laughing halfway through. And at one point, Zara leaned over, held my hand, and said, "You look like yourself again." And I did. Not the girl I was before him, but the woman I became after. More grounded, more whole, still sensitive, still soft, but with boundaries now, strong ones. The kind you build when you realize no one gets to call you too emotional just because they refuse to feel. Sometimes I still think about him, about the quiet way I walked out. The way his hands trembled when I said, "You didn't love me well." The 27 missed calls, the messages I never answered. He tried again months later. A long email full of memories and maybes. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because healing sometimes means leaving the door shut even after the knocking stops. I don't hate him. He taught me something no book, no friend, no therapist could have shown me. He taught me the cost of abandoning myself to keep someone else from feeling small. And now I know how to love without losing myself. I know what to do when someone calls me too emotional. I look them in the eye and I say, "Then I'm not for you." And I walk away because being too emotional just means I feel deeply. I care loudly. I speak when it matters. I cry when it hurts. I love like it's oxygen. And I'm done apologizing for breathing. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.